Yeah, let's get started. So, hi everybody, I'm Mary Ellen Slayter. I'm the CEO and founder of RepCap. We're a content marketing agency that specializes in HR tech, insurance, and financial services marketing, but even more specifically, we do lots of thought leadership content. And I am very, very excited today to introduce you to my friend Viola. I guess it's like comrade, colleague, peer, collaborator, whatever we want to call it at this point, who does similar work, I think, for similar businesses, but doing SEO. So in addition to running, RepCap, I'm also the publisher of Managing Editor magazine. My background, I'm a former Washington Post career advice columnist. I was a financial editor, and I worked at a company called Smart Brief doing email newsletters. So this is basically, I've been writing about the future of work for 20 years, and now it's here, right? And the changes in content. So I'm really excited about this particular presentation. I'm going to let Viola introduce herself here, but like I said, some of my favorite work that we've done this year as an agency has actually been in partnership with Flow SEO, which is Viola's company. So I'm going to let her introduce herself right quick here.
Perfect. Too. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited about the conversation today because we'll dive in the myth and prejudice that we both have about the different disciplines in marketing and that I know people have. And I'm so very, very excited. I run a company called Flow SEO where we do bespoke SEO strategy for software companies, predominantly HR and e-learning. And I've talked about SEO in very many different places. So you can find my tutorials on managing editor, but also on like search engine journal, Ahrefs, Thrive Themes. And I have 2 SEO courses that a few thousand people have taken. And so very excited to share some of my learnings today and see what is working in SEO and thought leadership content. How can we cooperate and how does it work in B2B specifically, just to take it up a notch even more. We're discussing a B2B context here.
And just a little housekeeping, those of you, as everybody's coming in there saying hi in chat, that chat is also where you can drop your questions, because while we do have a presentation we're going to walk through, we're going to leave lots of time at the end because we have found that people have lots of questions about this topic. So like drop them in the chat, and whenever we get ready with the talk, we will grab them. We'll either answer them in line or they're at the end, depending on what makes the most sense. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about today is essentially some of our myths. And some of this, frankly, the origin of this webinar in part came apart because I was talking to Viola about how I used to have some really terrible ideas about SEO, like some things that I assumed about SEO that this year I basically learned that they weren't true, in part by working with Viola and her team and a couple of other really great firms that we partnered with. And so we want to talk about the some of these myths. And also, it's interesting, I learned that Viola had some assumptions that she said that SEOs, not her personally, but SEOs tend to have about people who do thought leadership content. So talk to us about, what did you think about us, Viola? Talk about SEO and thought leadership.
Right. So the way I would describe it, let me pull up this one for a second. I think the prejudice that SEOs have against many other forms of content, one of which is thought leadership content, is this, right? As SEOs, we pride ourselves in bringing in long-term traffic, reoccurring traffic that compounds over time. And I think the prejudice is like creating a thought leadership piece of content. It takes a really long time. It's probably expensive. We feel we could have, done 5 SEO blog posts for, the price of one thought leadership piece. And then the prejudice is someone published, a great study, a white paper, and Rand Fishkin coined this term as we see the spike of hope. So we have that 1 or 2 days with a huge spike of hope and traffic. And then, oh no, we see the flat line of nope, because it's not optimized, it's not redistributed, and then basically 6 months later, no one is finding it anymore. And I would assume this is what makes the cost of production and the perceived drop in traffic is what scares some SEOs tipping their toes into the waters of thought leadership content, which is a pity. And we're going to talk about that more.
I can go back to this slide. Tell me what's happening in this slide, because I think what's happening here, actually, I'll talk about this for a second. For me, I remember I used to even tease Viola about saying, why is SEO content so boring? But what I learned was that it doesn't actually have to be boring. I think there's some really outdated practices that could make it come across as boring. And what we used to do the assumption I made as somebody who's been in content marketing for a decade now is it's just writing the same word over and over and over again. And like, that is not something that I, as a human being, want to read in general. And I definitely don't want to read it when I think about B2B. I look at this and I'm like, why would anybody read this? Like, I understand that Google brought someone to a page, but this is what I thought SEO was.
And I think you're not wrong. I think when people think about SEO, they think about keyword stuffing, repetition. They think about cheap writing. They think about all the people that reach out to them for backlinks, which I know you get these people, which are like awkwardly asking for backlinks. And so I think it's very, very common that people have this conception. And I think, and I said this to you, is like, look, you have this conception of SEO because it used to be true. Google has gotten a lot smarter, but in the early days, you could literally write the keyword that you wanted to rank for, white text on white background 20 times on a page, and you would be able to rank for it. Because in the early days, Google wasn't as smart. It wasn't as good at understanding context or relevance. And so it was very much a matter of using the keyword more often. And of course, SEOs have exploited this ranking factor keywords. They've stuffed it in everywhere. They kept repeating it. And obviously, Google has been trying to catch up on that and has been working really, really hard on getting better and better and better at understanding relevance, which ultimately that is their job, right? They are meant to return the best answer to a search query. And in the past, they were not really good at determining that. And keywords was one of the ranking factors that they very heavily relied upon. And so SEO content used to be stuffed with keywords. But the good news is today, that's not the case anymore. And the good news is also that Google is incredibly clever today at understanding synonyms and variations. And so in the past, maybe Google didn't even know that apple pie recipe and best recipe for apple pies. Google didn't even know that, these are related topics and could potentially, serve the same search intent and have the same page. And so SEOs would spin up hundreds of pages that are so similar. And of course, they would drive the content marketers nuts. And I think the good news is Google has changed. It's a lot more about quality now. It's a lot more about getting people to stay on the page, having positive engagement signals, etc. And yeah, the good old days of stuffing the keyword and luckily are gone. I think the ideas of SEO copy being a bit dull and colorless are still very much happening. And I think you and I are both excited about adding color to SEO content.
So this is because here's one of the areas I will just say, as a writer, as a feature writer, turned, content marketer, I like good leads, right? So like, I think one of the things that's often in tension for me is I want to write a grabby like hook in a lead, but good SEO principles say you have to get that keyword in that first paragraph. And I think that is still somewhat, I don't think that's not true. I think that's still a favorable thing to do from Google's perspective, but I feel like I just have to come out and say, this is a story about blank. Like I don't get to drop and pull people in. And I do think I think Google has gotten smarter about that as well. Like they give us a little more freedom around the contextual aspects of search. That I still think that's a bit of a work in progress, but I think it is true. I think that it does not actually have to be dull. Like I think right now we're just kind of stuck on some legacy habits. So you mentioned earlier about thought leadership being time consuming and complicated to produce. That is 100% true. Like I will not deny that. Whenever you're asking people to develop original ideas, thought leadership rests in, hey, what is your unique perspective? Like, and having thoughts like that are worth sharing is work, right? That is hard work. However, I've also come around to realize that like having great thoughts and putting them out there, I always say this, if step one is have thoughts, step two is leadership. SEO is a pretty important part of how you lead and get your ideas out in the world, but it's a dance. So
it's definitely a dance. And I think what thought leadership, the opportunity in thought leadership content is, I think as SEOs, we maybe get a bit lazy. We kind of had the assumption that content needs to be really cheap. It needs to be at scale. and we tend to write about similar topics over and over again, and we tend to copy a lot from what's already on page one, which is another SEO who maybe didn't really have a good content budget. And so I think this is where you come in, because getting something to rank is one part, getting people to remember you is another part, right? And I think this is something where we as SEOs have lots that we still have to learn, basically.
So we're going to move in this conversation. Now that we've kind of put out there, these are the things we wrongfully assumed about each other, like perhaps in the past. We're going to get past those myths a little bit. Like, so Viola, you have a way of your model for thinking about content and thinking about SEO is an intertwined model, and that's what's here on this slide. So I'm going to let you talk through this.
Perfect. Yeah. So I've called this the holistic model of like SEO success, but probably it's the holistic model of like content success in general. And basically, what I encourage you is to be aware that content has three main components that you're trying to balance and that you're trying to overlap in that Venn diagram. And part one, Mary Ellen, this is your wheelhouse, is who are you as a brand, right? What is the story that you're trying to tell? What do you stand for? Also considerations like, what is our tone of voice here? Are we funny? Are we serious? How does it look like? What are our values that we're communicating? And I think this is the step that we as SEOs tend to forget. And this is the step that has the opportunity to really stand out and create something unique. And that is part of like, why does this business exist to begin with? What are you trying to do? What's the vision behind it? And the second part is obviously, who is your audience? Who are your ideal customers? And what are their desires and needs? What are they trying to achieve in their teams, in their business? What problem are they trying to solve? Do they need to motivate their team? Do they need to streamline an internal processes? Are they trying to save money? Are they trying to make money? Like, you know, what is on their mind and what are they trying to do? And I think as SEOs, we can gauge that a little bit through search volume and how many people are looking for what type of queries on a monthly basis. But I think really going beyond the obvious and really trying to understand, okay, what do we know from sales? What do we know from customer success? Like, what do these people want? And really catering that in and targeting our strategy towards them is going to be really important. And then the third...
Can I add something on that? Because I think this is really important, because I think this is something that your team does really, really well as B2B specialists that is not universal to SEOs, okay? When it's B2B, understanding the difference between search terms and intent for a B2B audience and a B2C audience, like you can look at something and have it say, well, there's a high volume of search around a term like parental leave, okay? That, if you are coming in from a B2C perspective and like, who is doing that searching, right? As opposed to, oh, I'm working with a parental leave management firm, right? That doesn't mean that the person, that's not they're not the ones searching for that term. Like your B2B buyer, HR is not searching for parental leave. They have a much more, it's like parental leave policy template, maybe.
Right, exactly.
I just want to throw that out there because I think that is something, a really important B2B, B2C thing that I think your team gets and does really well that I don't always see.
Yeah, and I think we can go in that in a second when we talk about structure, etc., right? And probably you want parental leave somewhere, but like you said, like parental leave policy or granting parental leave process or a handover before parental leave or how to find replacement, etc. You know, there's like different considerations that you have as a manager when you're trying to map out that process for your company, which is different from the person who's like, how long is parental leave? How is my salary going to be during parental leave? What kind of like benefits can I expect? It's just two very different audiences, and being very, very clear on that, I think is important in any content strategy, definitely.
That's right. I just like, that's one of those things that's one of my big challenges. And I really do think y'all do that very well. So you can talk about algorithms now. I know you do algorithms well too. So
I like it. Basically, so the third part is like respecting algorithms and ranking factors. And what I mean by that is like, again, Google is trying to understand relevance, and it's estimating relevance based on ranking factors. And so what you've been saying is like how I've worked with people is like, we work with them to find the keywords, to figure out what type of content we should be writing. But then I'm telling people, okay, now go away and create an excellent piece of content. And when you're done with it, run through an SEO checklist. And then you can do your things like add the keyword to the headline one, add your keyword to the page title. And to be honest, in most cases, you'll probably have done that because you're talking about the topic. So very naturally, probably your keyword has appeared in a few headlines, and so I think that is the step where you really want to optimize for the ranking factors. And this is not different from you put a post up on LinkedIn, you ask a few of your friends to comment so that you get some action. It's the same. You wrote a great piece of content and now you're tweaking it for keywords, for internal links, for metadata, and you're just making sure that Google is satisfied as well in that game. And we just have to make sure that this is like one part of the equation and not our entire strategy.
All right, let's talk about this then. So like, what do we need to know about, again, we're very B2B specific here. So what should we know about SEO right now? You've got kind of a quick list of things that are like good best practices right now. Let's talk about these.
Right. Or yeah, I would say maybe a list of like, let's say if you're a content marketer, if you're a thought leadership expert, if you're a content writer, I've got some good news for you. One, typically, if you write an article on Google today and it's long and detailed and covers the topic thoroughly, an article can rank for thousands of keywords. And not your entire website is ranking for thousands of keywords. I mean, one article can rank for your main keyword, of course, but it can rank for hundreds of variations. And so you might come into a situation where you have 400 keywords on page one and 3,000 keywords ranking in total. And some of these keywords you haven't even used in the article. Like you search your article and you're looking for that specific keyword combination and it's never going to be written anywhere. And so this is the power of optimizing well kind of for your main term and for the search intent, because Google is smart to figure out, okay, what are all the other search queries that people type that are somehow similar and that you deserve to rank for as well. And I think that is really, really good news. And especially the fact that you can rank for keywords that you haven't even written is really, really good news.
So one thing on that point, I have two questions for you. One, when you say write something long, define long, because I think this is something that also changed a lot in the last few years of like what Google used to want us to write, what we used to need to write, right, or at least what SEO has told me, and what you tell me to do now.
Right. So that's a good question. Let's say long comparative to what is currently on page one. And so what I mean by that is if everyone has a 4,000 word buying guide, 12 factors consider when choosing a CRM software. Everyone has a 4,000 word guide up and you're trying to rank a landing page that has 400 words, you're probably not going to make it because Google is seeing, okay, this is an informational educational query. People are still comparing. People are still in the information gathering phase. People want a guide and people want the guide to be kind of long. And so long for the query buying guide on CRM software then means, okay, if everyone has 4,000 words, I probably want to be somewhere, let's say between 3,500, 4,500 words. Like you don't need to meet like exactly what everyone is on page one is doing, but you kind of want to be in the right like ballpark figure so that Google sees, okay, we also have an informational guide here. If you look for Monday versus Asana, and you see that Monday and Asana are both ranking their landing pages in which they compare features, etc. And there's a bunch of other landing pages. I don't know if maybe ClickUp is like trying to say like, okay, Monday or Asana, you want none of them. You really want ClickUp. And everyone has a landing page ranking. Then you can write a 400 word landing page and it can be short and snappy and conversion optimized. But that is because you're in a different stage of the funnel where people are looking for a demo, looking for a trial, are ready to make a decision. And then long content can mean simply be 400 words. And so it's the stupid consultant's answer, which is it depends. And it depends on the search intent, and you can kind of distill the search intent from what you typically see on page one today.
Mm-hmm. And if you're struggling to like understand that up front, I think some of the tools are even beginning to incorporate that into the keyword, the search intent. Like I know that SEMrush just added a piece, and it's not 100%. I've seen some places where I'm like, no, I think that's actually commercial, not informational, but like it's pretty good. It's a pretty good way to start thinking about it. I also, something else you said I thought is also interesting. If you're going to do informational content, Viola, should you be gating it? Should your thought leadership be gated?
Ooh. So this is an interesting one. So gating your content can obviously, you're going to generate leads, you're going to get emails, etc. The thing is, if your content is behind a password, if your content is behind a lead form, it doesn't count towards your SEO efforts, right? And so if you want to be ranking with that piece, you actually will want it to be ungated. And so the way we think about it is, what are some secondary resources that people could download? So if you have that thought leadership piece, if you do have like an interesting industry case study, actually writing a piece of content that is crawlable, that is indexable, that is ungated, so it can start ranking. And then what are things that you can give people, like the presentation of the study, a template, a further resource that makes it worthwhile to be gated content that goes alongside with it. And who's done this well, in my opinion, is my client Beekeeper. They have a lot of like resources that go with their SEO articles, and they manage to map that really well. But yeah, the struggle is if your article is a PDF behind a lead form, it's not going to rank. It's not the type of content that Google wants to see. Yeah,
I can tell you right now, we took our survey, or we did a big content marketing career survey that we had gated because we saw that as like, hey, this is a big juicy piece of content. In the first year, lots of downloads. People were really fine with doing that, and we pushed people just fine. What happened? We noticed over the course of this year that we actually dropped in search, for terms around content marketing career and survey. And we went and we took it and we ungated it. And within a week, we were back up in the number 2 spot for managing editor salary. Right. Yeah. Literally, like Google was like, yeah, okay, we're good. And it didn't actually hurt me in conversions. This is the other thing that I found interesting is the increased traffic. What we actually saw were more people coming to the site, finding it, and then signing up for the newsletter and other resources. Yeah. So it didn't really hurt us.
And I think especially with studies and surveys, you kind of want to save it, you want to download it, you want to have the graphics. Like a lot of people will still want to download it, even if there's a long form article on the website.
So that was kind of an interesting. All right, so we're not doing stuffing anymore. Talk to me about it. You said an opinion will make you stand out in search.
Yes.
Actually, tell people what a SERP is. Totally.
So SERP means, it's kind of clunky, search engine result page. SERP is what you see after you enter the search query, right? You enter something in Google, you press return, and then you get a page, which in the past were just 10 blue links that lead you to 10 websites, and then you click on page 2, etc. That's the search result page. And what you will see here is, I just told you, it's like, hey, you got to have a look on page 1 to see what's typically ranking. And so now you looked on page 1 and you see, okay, typically ranking is a long form guide. It's a listicle with 20 tips. And so now you might have the idea, it's like, okay, everyone is posting 20 tips. I'm going to post 25 tips, which maybe that's not like the worst idea, because at least you're getting some eyeballs for having the most tips. But how about saying like, why you should not consider XXX, or why this is not the silver bullet, or we need to rethink performance management, or the thing is, like, if your headline, if your angle, if your story is exactly like everyone else on page 1, you just have a lesser chance of winning the click because it's also similar. And so an opinion, a catchy headline, a counter narrative to what everyone else is doing is very, very worthwhile, even though you might still be doing a long form content piece like they do. You can do it with a different opinion. And then the last one kind of like feeds into this is like, why would I share the 30th articles, with 25 tips? But what would I share on article and on social media, and what I would potentially link to is something that speaks, against, sheds a new light, has a new perspective, has something interesting to tell. It's just more likely that people will want to link to it too, which is what we want from an SEO perspective as well.
And this brings me to I'm just going to ask you also in the spirit of defining things and not assuming that people necessarily know what we're talking about. Google EAT guidelines, EAT, also make it pretty clear, which is kind of what we're following right now. The A stands for authority. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, what did Google do to us whenever there was a great opportunity for me. It made your job a little more complicated, but what is Google EAT?
Yeah. So EAT means expertise, authority, and trust. And it's basically Google, like many other platforms, obviously has a quality issue, right? Like everyone is writing about every topic, no matter how qualified or not they are. You can have an intern, write about a medical topic, with no medical background whatsoever, and it might rank because it respects ranking factors. And so Google has been starting to realize, okay, we need to do something about content quality. And so EAT really started to become the talk of the town probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. And it firstly became the talk of the town in the medical, wellness, wealth and finance and insurance space. And Google calls this your money, your life.
Yeah.
And it's basically the areas where there's a lot of at stake, because it's about people's health, it's about people's finances. And so Google is probably not smart enough to know who's the author of a blog post. Did they really go to medical school? Did they really make it through medical school? Google is not that smart. But Google can see, okay, so this website, do they have author profiles? Do they cite sources? When they do make claims, what kind of sources are they citing? How does that look like? Do they have, for example, publishing dates? Do they have about page, team pages? Can I easily find addresses and phone numbers of the companies, etc.? And so EAT, authority, and trust is really Google's way of combating poorly researched articles. And I think, again, this speaks, you being a journalist, the importance of citing the right sources, etc. And it's just a sign that, especially if you're in health or wealth, that you really got to step up your scientific or journalistic writing procedure really and start being really, really clean in how you present things. And so when I say point of view, that doesn't mean say anything and everything just for the sake of having said it, but it's also something that you can back up and know that this is how it's really going.
I think a good example of that would you rather get your health information from the Mayo Clinic or a website from some multi-level marketing scheme supplement company? Google does know that. Google does know the difference between those two domains, and that those are two different things.
And especially in the medical space, you want to go to primary sources. You want to go to scientific papers. And just because someone else is on page 1, for a health-related keyword does not mean you should make them the source for your article.
All right. Now I could ask you questions about this all day. So
let's talk about thought leadership a bit.
Yeah. So, okay. So the way that I like to think about thought leadership is that I see SEO will tell me what to talk about. Right. So when Viola and her team come to me and they've got a brief, I know there's a structure, there's a plan, and they say, write about performance management, please. That tells me what? That doesn't tell me how to talk about it. Right. It's not a box that I've gone into now where I can only say over and over again, what is performance management? Within that, as a thought leader, you have space to go take a look at what other people are saying. And as she was saying, say something different, right? Say something different, give your perspective. So I also like it. SEO will tell me based on the research, what people are searching for, what they care about, how they ask about it. Because the other piece of thought leadership is frequently we're asking people to change the way they think about something. But in order to get them, we've got to first go look and see how they asked. So I might want them to talk about, this is actually an example, we're going to talk about one of our clients here that we worked on together for a bit. I might want to talk about performance enablement as a new concept, but no one is searching for that. What I have to do is go meet them where they are, which is where they're typing in performance management, get them hooked in, and then I can explain why that's not the way, and to think about it this other way. But if I optimized around performance enablement, I would have completely lost the opportunity to get those people and change their mind. That's kind of how I think about it. The other way that I think that's important when I think about thought leadership in SEO content is do not just copy people. Like as Viola was saying, like part of your research is you're going to pull up what everybody else is saying. And if you just copy that, is it really yours, right? And so the rule I like to use is like go in, look at your content. And if I could pick your content up and put it on your competitor site, could anybody tell the difference? And if the answer is no, you have a thought leadership problem, right? Even if you're answering, even if you've got the SEO and you're answering the right question, you've got to say something differentiated. So those are the two critical elements for me is like, when it comes to this type of content, it's like, let the SEOs like give you some guidance. Like there's real insight in there into like what people are actually need to know and how they're asking, and then take that opportunity. Your thought leadership is in telling them how to think about it. Ideally, think about it differently.
Agreed. I think this is a great one. And I think this is the main thing that this SEOs disrespect is the copycat content. Mm-hmm. I think this is what we as an industry are very, very, very guilty of. And I appreciate you pointing that out. I love if you would copy it on a competitor side, could anyone tell the difference? I think many times, no. I think it's a great kind of like litmus test.
It's a test. It's painful for people. I often say this like in our first like discovery call, because I go do this, right? And I look at them and I think about like where they fit in that landscape, and I'm looking at their core messaging, and I can't tell these companies apart. Right. It's like you're in a crowded space. Like if you're in a crowded, you're gonna have to do something to stand out. But I also still do think that you have to also, what I have to do, get close to the customer. There's really, I know you'll say, oh, I'm talking to salespeople and having these conversations. It's like, nah, what they Google, that's what they're really thinking. People think in B2B, this is the other thing I would say, is people say we want to do thought leadership, and in B2B, people aren't searching for this stuff. I promise they are. Like, I promise they are, because we see it in the data, and it's really interesting. I think there's also a lot of talk right now about dark social, and dark referral webs, which is 100% the case. But I'm telling you, people don't go into the industry Slack group saying, what is AI in HR? What they do is they go and Google that stuff, and they want to look up things and get good, reliable information before they go into the 10,000 person Slack and ask for referrals. And I think that's I think people underestimate that in B2B. I mean, we see it in the traffic. We see that people are asking for information on these most basic terms, and you're missing that opportunity if you don't answer those questions for them.
Agreed. And I just quickly wanted to ask again, they were having a bit of a discussion in the chat with Paul saying, like, are you saying Ungated is preferred? Sales is going to be unhappy if we're not giving it any leads. And I just wanted to reiterate, Ungated long-form content is preferred because it makes you rank. That's not to say that you shouldn't have any sort of like lead generating implemented, in that blog post as well. It's just, if you went through all the effort and you wrote a really beautiful study or guide and it's only a PDF and it is only gated, you're just not going to rank for that. And you got to think about, okay, maybe I can publish it and then have the beautiful visual PDF or slide deck as the downloadable as well. It doesn't have to be, it's probably a case of and, not so much a case of or.
I would also say that in 2021 going into 2022, downloads of guides and white papers are not leads. They do not constitute leads. When I think about customer journey, when I think someone's at an information stage right now, they just want information about a topic. So as a marketer, I would definitely work on like where you position that, because those are going to be if you present those as qualified leads, marketing qualified leads, like you're handing over in many cases junk. Yeah. So I'm more into like the demand gen. I feel like most of what we're doing here is more on the demand gen side. And I do believe that actually long form content with well ranking with the right intent, can absolutely feed lead gen and like demand gen. But I think you should not think someone downloaded a white paper and now they're my lead. It's more like you got them on the site, they read stuff, they hung around, and then they asked to actually talk to you. like when they raise their hand. I'm getting cranky about that in my old age. Like, just because I read your white paper, I'm not your lead.
Agreed. Love that. Do you want to show the slide, and then we can maybe show that on an example, etc. I think this is a great one. So firstly, what are we looking at here?
Maybe explain that. This is when Viola and I met, y'all. This is when we met. This is the story of how we.
This is how we met. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a screenshot from an SEO tool called Ahrefs. And we're looking at the screenshot of a pillar page optimized for the keyword term OKR, objective and key results. And basically, you can see that this client had a page about OKRs around for a really long time. And you can see that the light orange chart has been, let's say, like somewhat stable. And that light orange chart is like the overall amount of keywords that this page is being found for. And so if we want to get traffic, we first have to be found on Google for that keyword. And then at the bottom of the chart in slightly orange are the keywords that are on page 1. And we see that we're still working on that. And so Mary Ellen and I, we met. She and her team did a beautiful job at creating an amazing looking website, a clean looking website, a great website structure. And then we decided to build out some of these pillar pages together. And the goal of these pillar pages was to win some of the head tails that can potentially drive a lot of traffic and that are currently costing a lot on PPC. And this actually is perfect into this discussion because it's like people researching stuff for the first time. They're just getting around a topic. They're starting to familiarize themselves. And you want to be a brand that pops up in that state already. And so instead of having to buy these clicks expensively through PPC, you want to appear on Google Organic Search, and you want to use that pillar page as an example for guiding people deeper into the funnel and then leading them towards your resources and leading them towards your blog posts. And I think on the next slide, the site basically went live this summer, and for it to be a 100% SEO success, we obviously want to be in the top positions, but we can see here kind of like the example of what we've been spoken to before is like this page is starting to rank for all kinds of like keyword variations, right? Not just OKRs, but different spellings, different type. What is OKR, key result, different spelling of that. And it is kind of on page 2 now. And because you can see these keywords have a lot of volume in column 2, and then also in column 3, KD, keyword difficulty, these terms are super competitive. We still have some work to do with like backlinking, further optimization to make it to the top position. But these are all keywords that the client historically has been stuck on page 5, 6, and 7 of Google that they historically would have had to pay to get these eyeballs to the site. But it's beautiful to get people onto the site, see them for the first time, and then drive them deeper in a page that, like I said, like outlines all their resources, shows the different blog articles. And the reason why that's so important for this client specifically is because they basically have the man coining the term OKR behind them, and they never ranked for it. So it was one of their like crucial concepts. They're very famously backed, and they should really be one of the first to come up and think about whenever someone types it in. But they were not even showing up, even though it was so core of their business. And I think I'm very, very glad that this page started moving now. And it hasn't even been live for that long. I think website went live in July, and I think that pillar page maybe like a few weeks after still. And so we're still in the first 3 months of this page starting to rank, and it's already has so much more rankings and traffic than ever before.
And I just dropped the page in there if y'all want to see this, because I also want you to see a little bit of what a really long page. We talk about long pages, that it doesn't have to mean people say, oh God, this content's so long, people will never read it. Absolutely they do. Like we will read it. We can see like what the bounce looks like on the page. We can see what the interactivity is on the page, but there are elements of the design. So like, I mean, right now we're talking about content in the sense that like copy, right? And we're talking about technical SEO, but like web design and development has also been a huge part of how we both highlight thought leadership and meet those SEO needs. So this is not a boring page. I mean, I feel like I could, if you guys want to pop in, I'm not going to put it on the screen because I don't want to do a breakdown of this whole page, but from the beginning to the end.
I would love to scroll through it, but
Oh,
definitely
we
go on the
could. Yeah, I can do it then.
betterworks.com/OKRs and have a look and scroll through the site, because long form content doesn't have to be like boring, like you said. And I think I put in one screenshot here is like, your opinion is welcome, right? And so obviously here John Doerr talks about the importance of execution and why OKRs matter, etc. And that's like the big claim, the big headline that pops up into that page straight away. And we do want these pages to be interesting and opinionated.
I'm going to pull this up here. I think you're right. I think let's take a look at it, because again, John Doerr is the epitome of a thought leader, right? And OKRs are actually, the new thing he's going to talk about is how we can use OKRs to fight climate change. I mean, just as a concept, my business uses it. We were actually recently adopted the OKR framework, but like Google uses it. I mean, this is the epitome of thought leadership, what John, what he has done here. And so, but you need to bring people along. So you'll see, we start off with the what are OKRs, right? So they're element, but this isn't just a wall of text. This is scannable. Why do they matter, right? And then there's another block. So this is how, we've got some more resources. OKRs versus KPIs. These are things that we knew were things that people wanted to know. And then we get down into it. Look, we get into templates. So, but it's all broken up. So this is this page, this is probably 2,500 words, isn't it? Well, if I remember right, I think we did a good. So did that feel because I think that's one of the things that sometimes scares people. They think I'm gonna make this long content. No one's gonna read that. I have that discussion with people a lot. They think no one's gonna. They absolutely will in a well-designed page.
Yeah.
So,
and to kind of wrap that up from an SEO perspective, what this page does is it structures the entire website. Because now we have, this is the OKR section of the website. Everything related to OKRs starts here, and everything that goes deeper into how to align on goals, how to set goals for every department, goal examples basically comes up there. And so all the specific terms about how to implement it, common challenges that people have with OKRs exactly comes from that centerpiece, comes from that pillar page, comes from that hub page.
Mm-hmm. What I love about that page too is it meets people where they are on OKR. So again, OKRs is thought leadership. Not everybody knows what OKRs are. You're trying to bring people in. But if somebody comes in, there are answers there to your questions, on the most basic level. But if you're not looking for basics, you can kind of keep going. And there's templates and there's resources, and the client here actually even does a master class on OKR. So there's places to go. And I think that's one of the things I really like that page.
Perfect.
All right. So let's talk about how we come together, right? I mean, you and I often talked about the thing we started off talking about the things that the myths about each other's work, but we also learned in the process of working together, there's actually quite a few things where we sync up. So I'm going to talk about how we fuel SEO with thought leadership, because I also want to talk about backlinks. I hate the whole backlink thing. What is a backlink? What's a backlink and why is it important for SEO?
So a backlink is when a third-party website links to you. And so your content makes it that you're relevant, and then backlinks give you an authority. Because Google realized very early on, if more people link to a page, it must be more important. And again, this is not different from Facebook or LinkedIn. When more people like and comment on your post, you're getting more exposure. And it's the same on Google. If more people link to you, your page is going to rank better.
Are all backlinks equal?
They are not all equal. So if you go now to Fiverr and you buy something for $50 that gives you 200 backlinks, I do not recommend. You want backlinks from a source that is in the same space, that also has organic traffic and ranks well in an article that is related to what you're wanting to talk about. So a link if you have an article about taco recipes and within taco recipes, they link to OKRs, it makes it you have a backlink, but you have no, relevance and authority coming from that. So you want links from players in the same field that talk about the topic and that link to a matching page on your website.
This is where thought leadership makes this easier. So my advice on backlinks is don't go asking for them. I mean, I probably get 100 as running managing editor, because it's an editorial site with like some good domain authority. I get probably 100 requests a week right now of people that are just like, please link to my thing. I don't do that. Why would I do that? There's nothing in that for me. However, good thought leadership and good content earns backlinks. People like, so it's almost part of, this is where it starts to intersect with like PR and influencer management, where if you put out something great and you share it with the influencers in your space and you earn a backlink from them, that's really good. And you're more likely to do that with true thought leadership content than you are with keyword stuff to SEO, old school SEO. Like that doesn't get backlinks, but thought leadership will. And then I think we know SEO might ranks the page, like it hits those factors, but thought leadership is what keeps people on it and also keeps people reading other things on your site. And I would also say, this is one of my favorites. It's strong opinions attract other strong opinions. I like to advise people, I'm a fan of strong opinions loosely held is a way to think about your thought leadership. Like don't mince around it, come up with it, put it out there, let people argue with you. It's not thought leadership if no one can disagree with it. I guess is the first thing I'm going to say. My definition of thought leadership involves like another smart person, a peer in your field has to be able to argue with you about it, or it's not thought leadership. So how do we fuel thought leadership with SEO, Viola?
Well, perfect. Yeah, I think number one, I think leveraging keyword research. Some people have been asking in the chat. You can definitely use SEMrush, Ahrefs. I think they're probably the top two SEO tools, in terms of like features and usability right now. And just trying to figure out where are people at, what are they looking for, I think is really, really powerful. And it just helps you to prioritize your topics. This is how I like to think about it, is I talk with content teams about the stuff that they want to talk about. Then we do the keyword research, and then we see like, okay, how do we prioritize our content production based on what people are searching for? Then optimization helps thought leadership content travel further, which is this idea, instead of a spike of hope and then it like drops dead, it's like if we do actually optimize it, it can start ranking, for the next few months, maybe already for the next few years. So you're gonna want to keep optimizing it, of course, and improve it, but it just makes it that you get recurring traffic to that, content piece that you spend so much effort in creating. And of course, just having like a well-structured, clean website helps increase trust overall. Yeah, I put in a slide. I wasn't sure if someone would like ask about what are SEO best practices.
It's
so
helpful.
I put in that slide.
It's a good slide. It's a good slide, actually. Let's pull that up, because I think it'll be attached to the PDF, guys. Whenever you get the follow-up here, you'll be able to access this. This is something that appears in literally every document that Viola gives my team. Like I could have written this. I think, yeah, I call this like the brushing your teeth like list.
Exactly.
It's, like
it's brushing your teeth. It's call it the rough and dirty SEO, which means it's like, as I said, go write a perfect piece of content that is like interesting, and then go over and try to meet as many of them as you can. If there's absolutely no way to get the keyword into a subheadline, there's absolutely no way. It is what it is. But try to meet as many as you can, just knowing that as smart as Google is, still needs to learn a little bit, give it some help. And if there's one of them that you absolutely cannot make it work, just go for the other one and move on. And then some people have mentioned Content Harmony in the chat. I've mentioned Page Optimizer Pro, Surfer. They help you to refine it and then really do data-driven keyword optimization. But the rough and dirty is, I think, what gets you like 80% there. And really end with it. Don't start with it. Like write a good piece first and then basically tweak it.
One of the things that's also struck me in this is how much of this is around the planning. I think even as a writer, I have a brand story in mind that I'm trying to tell, right? And I have like the overall content strategy, and I consider SEO, in my world, SEO is a content strategy, right? It's like, okay, we're going to do content. We're going to focus on SEO. We're going to focus on, I usually, in past, frankly, I put them in opposite buckets. Like I don't see them as quite so separate anymore. But when we think about how much of this happens actually before we even write, You know, I think you mentioned well-structured website. Talk about that. What makes, because I believe that I've seen this. You can produce amazing content and you can do all the single on-page stuff you need to, but if the website itself isn't built for engagement, it doesn't matter. So talk to me about that. What's a well-structured site?
Right. So the like I said, the goal of Google is to structure information and give the most relevant answer. And in many ways, your website has the same goal, right? It's finally someone is coming to your website and you want to give them what they're looking for. You know, if they're ready to buy, you want to show them exact features and what they can and cannot do. If someone is having considerations, you know, you want to show them how does a software, you know, fit into their strategy, or what are they trying to achieve with their team. If they're coming in for the first time and they're familiarizing themselves, you know, you want to make sure that they find the guides, or like this one, they find the pillar page about OKRs. And so your website is essentially a resource library. And from an SEO perspective, the main thing you want to think about is like, one, what are your 2, 3, 4 main topics? And so in this case, for example, it was OKRs, employee experience, and then performance enablement, performance engagement. And we have these 3 pillar pages to structure the rest of the content around it. And then basically the SEO structure that you want to respect is like 1 page per topic, 1 topic per page. And I would say this is probably the number one content marketer's mistake for SEO is that you figured out a keyword, you love it, you want to rank for it. And in an attempt to rank for it, you might think, if I write about that topic more often, I might be ranking better. But what really happens is that instead of having that one best answer to a search query, all of a sudden you have 5 articles on your website, all competing for the same keyword, all competing with billions of other websites on the web for the keyword, and you're making everything really, really unclear. And so if you're going home with anything, it's like 1 topic per page, 1 page per topic. If you already have a page and you're now realizing it's too short, it's not optimized, it doesn't have an opinion, you want to update that page instead of creating a second one.
I was going to say, so the word that gets tossed around for this, it's a gross word, but this is the term that seems to be cannibalization. It's like we want to avoid keyword cannibalization. And that's what you're doing whenever you make multiple pieces of content that are all competing for the same term. And I think what I like to do, I actually would say that's one of the things I probably spent a ton of time, like people that we've worked with a long time, going back and basically going through that content library and saying, let's merge these pages, let's redirect this, let's pull all of this in here. And like in the end, like it's okay if you have 1/3 of the pages that you had before, if they're all really good, right? If they're all good answers, like I would rather see you have 5 pages, 5 really great pages that answered like the right query. Again, for B2B, I mean, thinking about the specificity of what we're doing, we're not usually selling some one-off product here. Like go deep in your area.
Yeah, agreed.
And then I see also Vincent asked about using custom research in content process. And this is kind of interesting because we do this, right? So we do custom research, we do surveys, and we also sometimes do work where we take internal data that's being collected by the company in the course of their business, and we adapt that and turn that out. And I've been using SEO research to shape some of this, because I think the biggest mistake that I find people may say, oh, we want to do a research report. And I'm like, okay, what's it going to be about? And they'll give me a topic. And the problem is often that the perspective that they want, it's like information that's interesting to them, but they're not thinking about what will be interesting to the target reader at the end. You know, like if you have to plan that survey so that you're asking questions that when you get the answer to them, what question are they answering, right? So you might have that general idea in your head, but keyword research, if you go over and look at a topic and you see a topic where people are searching for things and looking for definitive answers and no one has answered that question well, you can use that to shape your custom research decisions and how you design your survey and what is the question you're ultimately answering. That is the single biggest, I don't know if y'all are following me here, but that is the single biggest mistake that I see people make. They make research for themselves. Companies, B2B brands make it for themselves and not for their customer. So what that looked like in our case was when we did the managing editor career survey, I saw that people were searching for that. That was a moderate volume Well, if you can imagine this, 4 years ago, that was a moderate volume search term with low difficulty and thin content responses. And people really wanted data. So we built a survey for it and to give them that data. And
yeah, I think it's an important, and I think this ties back to the Venn diagram before, right? It's like your vision was to help managing editors, and then it was about figuring out what they really wanted, and making that part of your strategy.
And you can gut check it, right? And I think it's actually really important to do this before we talked about how expensive thought leadership content is. You should definitely, that's a way to de-risk it. You know, before you go spend $25,000 making a report, and you've got a $100,000 budget behind it for promotion, which by the way is like a totally normal thing if you're going to do content like that in HR tech, you know, in fintech. So before you go do that, if you can go pull up an SEMrush or Ahrefs and make sure that people actually want to know what you're about to go spend all that money asking, like that's how I like to use SEO.
That definitely, and just to add to that, SEMrush, Ahrefs, a really good resource for what people are really looking for is your own Google Search Console. And so you probably know Google Analytics for your tracking, but Search Console is basically your hub to communicate with Google directly. And it's one of the few places where you can still see what keyword type people typed into Google to come to your website. And so your Google Search Console query report is really beautiful to find search traffic and keyword ideas and see what you want to be improving upon. Because sometimes you will see that this SEO tool tells you there's 20 searches a month, but your Search Console tells you there's already 2,000 people a month seeing your listing. And so definitely use Search Console as another data source when making these decisions.
Okay. I've got a question about using thought leadership as a strategy for tradespeople and contractors. So I'm going to answer this. There's a couple of ways. One, in my previous life, I was a real estate writer, like reporter and editor. So I can kind of do a little B2C on this side, but I would say, yes, there's no reason you shouldn't do thought leadership like in your field. I think anyone who is an expert and a professional in their field should be encouraged to do thought leadership. I think the way I might approach that for B2B, which is, again, sort of staying in my lane, I think there's definitely opportunity there, you know, partnering with the trade magazines, writing about something, but remember to write for your buyer, right? In a B2B environment, like, are you a subcontractor who wants to reach a contractor, or are you trying to reach, I mean, if I think about commercial building, right? It's like, am I trying to reach real estate agents? Absolutely. A contractor could begin to develop content that could reach bankers or however you want it, but it's about the audience. I think this is where, or if you want to do B2C, that's also good. I mean, I think that gets into more how-to content. I think that some of that can be really, for it to be thought leadership, you've got to be trying to change people's minds about something. If you've got a new and innovative and interesting way to do it, which is obviously very possible, right? And thought leadership is how you would do that. But I distinguish that from how-to content, where you're explaining, hey, here's how to, solve this problem, or here's how I solve this problem, or here's the questions you should ask. I don't know if that's a helpful answer, Jamie.
Perfect. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Paul. Paul, you've been asking a bunch of questions in the Q&A section. I've answered them all in the chat. So if you scroll through the chat, Paul, you're going to find different answers there. And I also linked a guide on how to optimize for featured snippets there.
Mm-hmm. And we are at time. I think I just want to kind of just to reiterate this. I think that this was a good post. So we'll post the link to this. This was a piece that Viola actually wrote for Managing Editor that is a very good explainer about some of these contents. If you would like to just go and just kind of read through some of this and digest it that way, I think this is a very helpful asset. And then we went through all of our questions. So, very quickly too, as we wrap up, if you all want to just drop your LinkedIn in the chat, if you guys want to follow up and connect with each other, you want to connect with us. I do post pretty frequently there. I know Viola does as well. So love to stay in touch and send us questions. You can just email them if you like. This is my favorite topic. But just to kind of bring it all together, there is one thing I do want to say that I do think we very much have in common. And that was something I think we realized that we were working on this. Neither thought leadership nor SEO are quick fixes. when it comes to content and when it comes to marketing. Neither one, if you've got people breathing down your neck saying, I'm going to need 100 qualified leads, if it's like, and you're like, who's my buyer? And you say, it's the Fortune 500, head of HR, and I'm going to need 100 leads. And I'm like, and I need them by next week. And I'm like, okay, that's not going to happen. So, right. But like, I would say this is a patient game. And I don't mean it takes years, but it's like, if you're doing real thought leadership, you're trying to change people's minds. That takes time. It's going to take multiple pieces of content and multiple channels, different angles, meet people where they are. SEO takes time. I mean, even though we showed you that chart that showed just there was a bump within a couple of months, but like neither of these things will fix your sales pipeline in a week.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, right? If if the house is on fire and you're trying to close a deal before Christmas in the next 10 days, starting to map out this content strategy is not what you're looking at. You're probably looking at performance marketing, social media, business development, outbound sales, etc. However, when you realize that, exactly, buying ads, but when you realize that you are very dependent on your ad spend, that you don't really have a lot of people coming to your website organically, except for maybe those people raising their hand and existing customers, this is usually a good time to start thinking about content strategy, SEO, thought leadership, and saying like, okay, how can we make sure that we have organic touch points with people as well, and not just sales driven or performance marketing driven touch points.
This is sustainable. So I know, and in the sense it's not an immediate fix, but it's also the best sustainable model. Like, this is something that once it gets going, yes, you'll need to update your content every once in a while, but if you really get this set up well and you give people good information, good experiences, like, this will deliver interest. This will drive demand for longer than it might take you 3 months to get it rolling, but you'll see the dividends still paying off in 18 months and 2 years. And that's not true of any ad campaign I know of.
Agreed.
Cool. All right. I think that's a wrap. Anybody else? Last call.
Perfect. Well, I'm stoked to keep chatting with all of you on LinkedIn. I'm opening all your profiles as we speak and really excited to keep the conversation going. And thank you so much for everyone coming today. It was great to have you.
Cool. We had Del Rey on here and he didn't even say anything when we showed his page. All right. Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.